Hello, this is Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator. So happy to be joined this morning by Chris Kopin, who is Executive Vice President of Technology with Kramer North America. Thank you so much, Chris, for taking some time to chat with Commercial Integrator's audience and me today.
Yes, thank you.
So we have a lot to chat about. Let's get right into it. Kramer, of course, recently has released a highly scalable AV-over-IP streaming solution that's been getting a whole lot of attention. For those who don't already know about Kramer's KDS-7 line, what offerings does that line include?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great question. Yeah, the KDS-7 line actually was born out of our KDS-6 line. That was very successful for us for the last couple of years. And basically, the KDS-7s were born out of our really interfacing with customers and looking at the different feature sets that we had in the 6s that sort of then morphed its way into the 7. So it definitely was a lot of customer feedback. But we have a really a complete line. So we have, in fact, it's kind of that over my shoulder there, I have the whole setup. But I have box style encoders. So we have a single HDMI input encoder. We have switching encoders. So we have HDMI as well as USB-C, which has been a very popular, standard for us moving forward here. I've got the same on the decoder side, where I have decoders. That is a box style decoder that has not only an HDMI input, but also, not just an HDMI output, but has an HDMI input. So it's a kind of unique on a decoder to have a HDMI input. So you have direct access to that display locally there in the room. So in addition to these box style encoders and decoders we also have wall plates. So this is also something very unique for Kramer, that we have a wall plate that is an encoder. So it's a HDMI and USB-C again, so a switching encoder wall plate. And then we have a decoder wall plate as well. And all of our devices are fanless, so they run very, very quiet, as well as they provide, or they draw very little from the network switch from a PoE standpoint. We're talking about 6 watts or less. So in addition to that lineup, we have our manager. So that's kind of the key pin here to everything, that the KDS manager is what allows your deployment to be managed from a single point of contact. So the manager, which is a hardware box, is in communication with all of the encoders, all of the decoders. It allows then management of that deployment, which is doing setup, getting things configured correctly, troubleshooting, firmware updates, basically, that one central point of contact.
I have to say, it's a very impressive lineup, and I appreciate you going through all the elements that compose it. I want to talk a little bit now about the end user experience. I think you would probably agree that the end user experience is really front and center these days in any kind of a technology related discussion. So can you talk about some of the UX elements of the KDS-7 line, including, for example, simple and fast deployment, capacity for instantaneous switching, things like that?
Yeah, I think, when any kind of AV over IP system, I think there's a number of things that people are always concerned about. And one is, the bandwidth that these devices will consume on their network. You also have latency, which is, very much a user experience. If you've got an encoder and decoder in the same room, your latency, does need to be low enough, usually under a couple of frames, where you move your mouse and then you see the mouse move, kind of thing, that you don't want to see that latency. So right. I think that's a big part, and these are very low latency devices. Switching is another thing. So if I have a number of encoders and decoders in the room, and kind of a matrix type of environment where I want to have what we call like that elegance factor. So these do have a very, very fast switch. It really is dependent upon resolution and maybe HDCP and a few other factors, but it gets as close to just about a direct cut. So it's very fast. We have a very unique numbering system. I think from a user even from a really from a user standpoint, all of our encoders as a one-time function, we give them a unique channel number that is displayed right on the front of all of our encoders. The decoders have a channel up and down button on them. So literally, as an end user, if I was a sports bar owner, for instance, and I had a problem with, say, my control system, I could walk up to any decoder and just push the button channel up and down to be able to route from any encoder that I want. So I think that's a pretty unique function for us that I know end users, it's sort of that in their back pocket. If they actually had to make a switch directly there in the room, they could actually do it. I think the other thing I would come to mind would be the manager. So again, from an end user perspective, we've done a number of applications that are casinos and sports bars, where you do need to have that ability to look at your entire deployment. Our manager does actually give you a thumbnail of what the encoder is doing. So it's a low refresh rate, but it's a thumbnail of active video of what the encoders are doing, as well as thumbnails to see what the decoders are doing right there in the manager.
Well, thank you for going through all those end user focused features. Clearly, Kramer is very much focused on the user experience, as we were talking about, and all of those features and benefits clearly reflect that. I want to talk a little bit about being able to scale up. For example, trying to meet any kind of size network AV installation. That's a very important consideration as well. Can you provide some insight into how Kramer's KDS7 line suits large-scale deployments that might entail up to, say, 1,000 video sources, and that would really necessitate robust management capabilities?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit the number right on the head. We sort of have a theoretical hard stop at 1,000 as far as our encoders are concerned, because the numbering system that I mentioned before does stop at 3 digits. So it's 999 as far as encoders are concerned. The decoder side is literally limitless because the network switch in multicast does duplicate that video stream. So the system can scale to as many decoders as, again, the network would allow. So it's really limitless. And then it's the manager. The manager really has no limit to it. So you're able to group your encoders, decoders. You can group them by room. You're able to actually, see your deployment, make changes, verify things are working. So I think in a lot of applications that are critical to 24/7 type operations, you're able to verify again from that single point what is happening with my deployment.
So let's talk a bit about enterprise IT grade security. I would argue, I assume you would agree, that that's really become kind of table stakes for many key vertical markets. I'm talking about things like Homeland Security, other government clients, as well as corporations. How does Kramer's KDS7 line, from its Ethernet ports to its device certification, reflect best practices of robust security that's so important today?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Security. I mean, we hear it on the news all the time. It's hacking is a big concern, and so we have a number of different things. We are 802.1x compliant. So our devices need to be authenticated, the users, the devices. So that is, I know a lot of universities even are very concerned and are looking for devices that are 802.1x. We are also HTTPS, so all of our web communication between the manager and our encoders and decoders are going through that security protocol, as well as we submit our devices to OWASP certifications. So there's an OWASP 10 certification, which is your top 10 most popular or most critical vulnerabilities that we also, our devices have been cleared with. So we do take security very seriously, and we think we're up to the task of these secure environments.
It's a very, very forward-thinking posture, because it is so important these days. And these environments obviously are ones that Kramer and every leading manufacturer are going to want to play in. So kudos for that. Let's just, as we close out this interview, revisit some of the verticals and applications for which Kramer's KDS line is particularly well suited. Are there any that we've not hit on or kind of alluded to? I'd love for you to kind of just expand on that.
Yeah, actually, when I think about, verticals, government, military, that kind of thing. In fact, there was one other thing that kind of goes into the security from the last question, is that all of our devices are dual network. So we have two network ports on our encoders, decoders, manager, so you could have your data stream being isolated from your, say, control stream. So again, that's another sort of level of that security. I think retail and hospitality is definitely a vertical that we've been seeing some nice applications with. I mean, really, you think about anywhere you're processing a fair amount of audio, video. I mentioned casinos before, which is obviously part of hospitality. I know we've got a lot of sports bars that we've been involved with. So I think it's that, I think it's just AV over IP in general. It scales very, very well. You're not tied to that fixed matrix. So you think of these environments and, even schools. I mean, we're finding classrooms now, they want to be able to route what's going on in one classroom with overflow to other classrooms, or to be able to archive information to be used later on. So I think your AV over IP really does broaden itself to pretty much any market.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. It was really, I have to say, an informative dialogue. I learned a lot about not only AV over IP and its ascendance, but also, of course, Kramer and the new KDS7 line. So thank you for elucidating some information that I think a commercial integrators audience will really find actionable and important. I appreciate you taking the time to do it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Dan.
Pleasure to have been joined by Chris Kopin, who is Executive Vice President of Technology with Kramer North America. My name is, of course, Dan Ferrisi, Editor-in-Chief with Commercial Integrator. Please check back on commercialintegrator.com regularly for more great and informative content just like this. Thank you.